Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about something huge that's happening inside the world's biggest companies. The way their boards are set up, the very structure of their leadership is, frankly, broken. It's just not keeping up with the massive, tangled risks of the world we live in now, like cybersecurity, the explosion of AI, and of course, sustainability.
So let's just dive right in with the big question, right? With so much at stake, we're talking everything from our personal data to the health of the planet. How is it possible that these enormous risks are basically invisible in the one room where all the most important decisions get made?
You know, the root of the problem actually starts with the design of corporate boards themselves. They were built for a completely different and honestly a much simpler time. And now that old-fashioned structure is really starting to show some serious cracks.
And this visual gets right to the heart of the problem. See, the old way was to chop everything up into these neat little vertical silos. You've got your audit committee over here, compensation over there, and things like cyber, AI, and sustainability. They're treated like these separate, walled-off issues. But the shift we desperately need is to a unified model, one that understands these risks aren't separate at all. They're deeply interconnected threats to the entire company's value.
Now, what makes this whole thing even trickier is who is actually sitting around that boardroom table. I mean, overwhelmingly, these boards are filled with former founders, CEOs, and CFOs. And don't get me wrong, their financial expertise is absolutely vital, but their focus is almost always on margins, growth, and ROI. And that creates this massive and honestly pretty dangerous blind spot when it comes to technology, data, and ethics.
And look, this isn't just some academic theory. As business leader Andres points out here, this lack of digital fluency is very, very real. It means that when these incredibly complex issues around AI or data security pop up, the board often can't really interpret the information correctly, or even understand what's truly at stake.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, it's not as simple as adding another committee. It's about a fundamental shift in mindset. It's about moving away from just ticking compliance boxes and toward a proactive mission to protect the company's long-term value.
The goal is to adopt what experts are calling integrated risk governance. Now, I know, it sounds like a bunch of corporate jargon, but stick with me. It's really a forward-thinking framework that forces leaders to see how a cyber attack, an ethical mess with AI, and a sustainability crisis are all connected, and how they all threaten the core value of the entire enterprise.
And the solution isn't just one magic bullet. It's a whole strategic framework built on 4 pillars that all depend on each other. You have to start by rethinking who is even on the board. Then you create a single, unified charter for all these interconnected risks. After that, you've got to develop new ways to actually measure performance on these things. And finally, you have to drive that culture of awareness from the very top all the way down.
Okay, but here's where things get really complicated. Because proposing some ideal academic model is one thing, trying to actually make it happen in the real world, well, that's when you see this major clash in mindset between the boardroom and, say, the university.
And this quote, man, it just cuts right to the chase. Business leaders live and breathe in a world driven by profit, by growth, by hitting those quarterly numbers. It's a harsh reality that shapes every single decision they make. And it's a world that these elegant, theoretical frameworks often have a really hard time connecting with.
I mean, you can see the huge gap right here on this table. You've got business leaders who are forced to think about the next quarter, maybe the next year. They're driven by intense market pressure. Then you have academics who can take the long view. They're thinking about systemic risks and societal responsibility. One group is tactical, the other is ethical. It's like they're speaking 2 completely different languages.
So here's the real kicker. The very system for choosing who gets on a board reinforces the problem. Those seats go to people with a proven track record of past financial success, not necessarily the people who have the future-focused expertise in tech and ethics that companies so desperately need right now.
So, how on earth do you bridge a gap that wide? Well, the path forward really requires a crucial act of translation. You've got to learn to speak the native language of the boardroom.
And that language is money, plain and simple. All these abstract, fuzzy risks, whether it's about data privacy, AI ethics, or sustainability, they have to be converted into cold, hard, tangible financial numbers. The board has to see the dollar signs.
This is a perfect example of that translation in action. A cybersecurity incident isn't just a tech problem you hand off to the IT team. It is a liquidity event.
That means it is a full-blown financial crisis, with immediate, real costs from your operations being down, from paying for forensic investigators, and from all the gaps in your insurance you didn't even know you had.
Look, accountability only becomes real when there are direct, personal, financial consequences. You have to start linking failures in ethics or sustainability directly to financial penalties. You have to tie executive bonuses to how well the company is doing on cybersecurity. And you have to stop the culture of just blaming one person, like the CISO, or as one expert calls them, the Chief Information Scapegoat Officer.
And this really gets at the massive disconnect between the textbook and the boardroom. In a risk management class, they teach you that executives need to formally accept risk. But in the real world, no CEO is ever going to sign a piece of paper that puts that kind of personal liability squarely on their shoulders. It just doesn't happen.
So ultimately, fixing this really comes down to a two-part solution. First, the people who understand these new, complex risks have to get much better at translating them into the language of financial impact. And second, we need a complete revolution in leadership education to build a new generation of executives who are fluent in both business and technology.
And that brings us to one final, provocative thought to leave you with. If failure has no real financial penalty, if no one's bonus or job is actually on the line, is anyone truly accountable? Or is it all just an illusion of control?